Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware.
Hi, I'm Lisa Garr, host of The Aware Show, and it is such a joy to be here with you today, talking about conversations that truly inspire positive growth and change. I always say conscious media is active media. This is not passive listening like Netflix, although that's okay too. This is where you actively engage with all of your senses and you really learn or change a behavior or a pattern. And then the best way to do this is when you share it with a friend. And then you're actually learning it on a different level. So we are talking today about something that we all have that's completely free, that's accessible to anyone, no matter what age, race, ethnicity, nothing matters. It's that little voice inside of you, but rarely any of us use it. Sometimes we do, and when we do, it's great and then we forget about it. But what about that little voice inside of you that tells you to do that thing that you ignored? And then you find yourself later saying, I should have followed my intuition. How many times have you said that? So especially if you're in any way a position of nurturing someone, like mother's intuition, I'll be fair and say father's intuition, parents' intuition. It's something that we all have, but throughout the ages, we've seen extraordinary human beings listening to their intuition to create incredible success in their life. Einstein and Da Vinci and Oprah and Stephen Hawking and all these incredible people. Well, let's add that to the list, Kim Chestney. Kim Chestney wrote a book on intuition, and it is called Do, a revolutionary guide to using your inner power. We're going to have such a great conversation today, I can tell. Welcome, Kim. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm so excited to talk about this with you.
Yes, absolutely. You've had quite the journey yourself, and I'd like to actually start with your journey because it makes a lot of sense as to why you're talking about intuition.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your story.
So I have not your traditional background in intuition. I come from the technology world. I've worked in tech for almost 20 years, but I've also been really drawn and passionate about intuition my whole life. So really this book is a beautiful coming together of sort of a reimagining of intuition, where we can look at the big picture of intuition, not only how it touches us in all those beautiful ways you just talked about personally and spiritually and creatively, but also how we can practically start to use it and embrace it as a culture to come together and to live our truth and really to come to the next level in existence.
Especially now. And now, can you give me an example of a time that you used your intuition in, say, maybe the tech world, where you had an experience where you followed your gut, or maybe you didn't follow your gut, and what happened?
Yeah, pretty much my entire career in tech was following my intuition, because I'm an artist. I graduated with my degree in oil painting. So I'm not someone who I never anticipated being in technology and really getting to the position I did, where I worked with some of the biggest tech companies in the world. And really before I made this transition into going full-time and teaching intuition, I was working internationally and really leading the way. I was elected to the Americans for the Arts Advisory Board in arts and technology and all this stuff. So I never really would have ever imagined or could have rationally chosen this path for myself. So really having this intuitively evolve was something I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing half the time. I was just following those little nudges and those little open doors that life brings.
So is there a time, can you tell me a time when your intuition really worked or maybe didn't work in the tech world?
Yeah, so really pretty much my entire career in technology, which was a huge surprise because I have a degree in oil painting. I'm an artist, that's my background. So really making this transition and really having success in technology was nothing I would have ever planned out or could have rationally considered. I really just let my career unfold by following those open doors of my intuition. And before I knew it, I was working with some of the biggest tech companies in the world and being elected to the Americans for the Arts Advisory Board to really talk about the economy and how intuition affects the economy and our growth and really where the rubber meets the road of the real change that intuition is making in the world.
Okay, so give me some examples because that is such an amazing story, but I'd love to know how that unfolded.
Yeah. So when I was working originally, my background, I went. You can see the whole transition. I started out as an artist, as doing my painting, and I realized I needed to feed myself, like most artists do at some point. And so I got into graphic design and segued into that sort of technology arena with graphic design, and found myself working at a technology council. And really, opportunities started to open up where I worked with entrepreneurs, and I founded an incubator called Co-Create, where I helped creative entrepreneurs start building their businesses. And it started to grow. And I actually got support by Carnegie Mellon University. And we did research with Richard Florida's group, who you would probably know from a lot of the creative economy work that he did. And so it sort of became this movement in the creative industries of using intuition to actually impact the reinvention of cities, of cultural projects, to innovate, to create, to support art, to support technology. And it was this whole new way of using intuition that it's a conversation we haven't really had much yet. And I think that's one of the things that's distinctive about radical intuition.
So you're saying using intuition to recreate cities. So are you following how people react, how they live? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
How people use technology, et cetera?
Yeah. So understanding intuition as this sort of guiding force that is behind all of the creativity that artists use and people use to create and design things, and also the inspiration behind new ideas and innovation and new products. And really, in terms of cities, of creating community and bringing people together. So it's really making this shift from following others and doing what the world is doing to intuitively coming up with this genius, insightful new ideas to really revitalize the world around us and the things that we touch intuitively.
So it's not just following intuition, it's following trends, which then follow the intuitive decisions that people make. So is that what you define? Maybe you have a different definition of intuition.
Yeah, so intuition, I think, really is getting really to the core of it. It is our connection to all that is above and beyond what we are. So whether we're looking at intuition as terms of psychic ability, in terms of our inner callings and our inner guidance, in terms of our heart and our soul, or whether we're using all of those things to manifest into the world and create impact in the world and follow things in the world that creates change and actual impact in terms of the way people come together. So really knowing intuition in this way is it's sort of a broad brush of understanding of body, mind, heart, and spirit. It's a big picture of intuition, how the other side of our mind really comes together to complement the mind and create this kind of genius I talk about in the book.
Okay, so there are, as you say, there's 4 kinds of intuition. Can you tell us a little bit about what those are? And then we'll talk around like fear.
Yes.
And how that gets in the way.
It's so important. That is true because it's such a big barrier. And really, there's really just one sort of type of intuition, but there's 4 different basic pathways that intuition can come to us. And this is something that I realized from talking with people about intuition when I was working on the book. For about 10 years, I did research on this, and everybody sort of had a different definition of intuition. Like we were talking about it. Some people say, oh, it's a gut feeling, or it's an inner knowing, or it's my creative inspiration, or it's the way I connect with God and the universe, right? Intuition's all of those things. And that's the reality is we've had these little buckets and these little silos of understanding intuition. And what I set out to do with radical intuition was really to open up this big conversation about how intuition really touches us in all of those ways, and that we can all use it. Every single person in the world has it. Everybody can use it to really open up a new dimension in their life and think in a whole new way. So the four types basically come down to the Jungian four cognitive functions, which of course come back to the age-old elements of body, mind, heart, and spirit. So our intuition can speak to us through our hearts. It can speak to us through our emotions, the way we're called, the way we move. It can speak to us through our minds with those knowings and our inner guidance that helps us to make choices and make decisions. It can talk to us with our bodies, right? With the feelings and the sensation and our gut and all of the way we're physically moved. And it can also really commune with us through our eternal transcendent spirits when we have those higher experiences and those moments of connectedness and bliss with life itself.
You use an example in the foreword of the book of the producer that created Grey's Anatomy, and that she tried to pitch it and so forth, and it wasn't going the way that she had planned. How did she use her intuition to actually get that to convince people that this was something that was really going to work?
Yeah, and I'm so excited to have Kim Moses write that forward to the book, because she's also from Pittsburgh, and so I've known her journey for a long time, and what she did with the Ghost Whisperer too was really revolutionary. I think that's a similar experience where she always wanted to do something different. And I think that's one of the keys of real innovation and being a real leader. It's not wanting to follow the pack, not wanting to do what everyone else does, but coming with a fresh idea and a fresh perspective, because this is what takes us to the new frontiers, right? This is what drives us to new places. And sometimes you have to take a chance, and sometimes you have to put it out there and just keep at it until people finally catch on, because they're going to think you're crazy in the beginning, because they always do. And
yeah. I mean, especially now, and I'll let you get back to that story in a second, but look, we're in this time of recreating everything the way that we knew it. And this is an important time to feel into intuitively what's next and how do you recreate what you had in a new way. Because a lot of industries are not going backwards, and they've got to go forward, right? And we've been no frontiers on something like this. We have no idea how to create going forward, especially businesses like ours, where we're gathering people together. That was one of our businesses. So it's taking a lot to convince somebody, here's this new idea and here's this new technology. You've never seen it before, but guarantee you it's going to work. I sound like a snake oil salesperson sometimes. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I love what you were saying too about, right now being this time where it's time for next level thinking, not the new normal. It's time for a new mind and a new way of really looking at the world. So, one of the characteristics of doing something great is being misunderstood in the beginning. And I don't know that there's a certain way to get around that other than to, as I always say, trust and believe in yourself. And that's where intuition comes in. We have to follow that truth within us. And that's really our only duty. If we know that we're following our calling and we're following our truth, it doesn't matter. We just got to keep moving forward.
Is that kind of the formula for success, is rejection? A lot of it.
Well,
when someone like your friend Kim is pitching a ghost whisperer or talking to the dead for national television, that couldn't have gone easily.
Yeah, well, we all fail forward. I mean, that's the truth of it. I mean, you hear about Dr. Seuss, right, who was rejected like 100 times by publishers before it came out. And people don't always see your vision. That's something that's part of the process. And you're out there with these new ideas. People aren't going to get it. And sometimes it takes time and perseverance. I think perseverance is so important, and just really not giving up, because there is going to be rejection, and there is going to be failing forward, and you are going to be an outlier when you're doing these things. But that's the deal.
I think that's probably the most important time for intuition, is to know what you're doing is right. And
yes.
Then now this is where the fear part comes in, is if you're intuitively trying to figure something out and your gut tells you to do one thing, yet you're getting doors slammed or rejection, or it's not going your way and it's not working out in the time that you want it to work out, is the time to go back in, and I'd love you to give us some type of an exercise of how to go back in and fine tune or really listen to what it's trying to tell you.
Yeah, and that is such a good point to bring up, because our intuition does do that. It redirects us, it calls us back in, because sometimes when we're out there, sometimes we get a little outside of ourselves. The world is a place that is full of distractions and can so easily pull us away from our inner connection. So it's so important that we check ourselves, and sometimes our intuition will check ourselves for us if we don't. To really say, this is what matters to me. This is what matters in life. And if I don't have this piece of success that I was really counting on, that I really felt that was the next step for me, maybe it's not the next step. Maybe it's the step after the next step. I don't know. Part of it is really getting ourselves out of the way and moving into that place of trust. And that's where it all comes back to the fear that you were talking about, right? So we get into that place of trust. That's the difference.
Do you have a certain practice where do you meditate? Do you draw? What do you do?
Yeah, and I there's a lot of different tactics, quote unquote, that I use to stay connected to my intuition, because, I feel these things. I go through these all the time. We're all human beings with egos and individual perspectives. So there's always going to be some friction. Our intuition is there calling us, showing us the direction, guiding us from within. But we also have these wants and needs and expectations that create friction in this process as we create our lives. So for me, really moving into the stillness and creating space in my life is really the most important thing. And I try to make that my grounding intention above it all, is to say every day I'm going to spend this time with myself. So personally, I like to do my morning rituals, which include a little meditation or reading or simply being still, having my coffee, slowing down and letting all those creative ideas of the day come in. And that really helps me to start the day off right, so that I'm in a high vibe place. I'm in a clear, quiet space where I can, just go about my day from a really intuitive perspective.
So your morning time it's your listening time.
Yes.
And then you've got to move into action, obviously.
Yes.
Okay. And so you can just create that space for yourself to really listen, feel into your next steps. And then how do they come to you? I'm really kind of dissecting this, but do you write them? Are you listening? Do you talk to them, speak them? How does that work?
All of those things, really. So I call it creating a practice of insightfulness. We talk a lot about mindfulness, and mindfulness is so important right now, especially in this crazy time with all of the chaos that's happening, is to calm down, get in that quiet space and that presence and be in that moment and be mindful, because that opens up the gates to this lifestyle of living insightfully, right? So that means living 24/7, constantly open to those moments of insight and creative ideas that come to you. So for me, I try to incorporate it in everything I do, whether I'm making decisions, whether I'm working on something, a retreat, or building something for my students, or writing a new book. All of those different ways, or different pathways, right? Of those 4 pathways we were talking about, intuition, that I can open up for insight to come and to get into that space where I'm in connection with myself, because it's so important to live that way. You can live that way all the time.
So how do you know the difference between intuition and fear? So like, say you're a parent and you don't want your child to go somewhere. Is that fear, or is that like you really having an intuitive hit?
Great question. And I think that's one of the most important questions I get around this work. And I spend a lot of time really going into that in the work I do, because in order for us to trust our intuition, it has to come through to us, right? In order for us to follow it, we have to trust it. So we have to get this sort of practice of validation. We have to know that our intuition's real. And I think in those moments when, say, for instance, your kid's going off to do something and you're not sure if it's your maternal protection coming in or if it's actually something real. So a couple of the answers to that question right off the bat, in the book, I have like a big long checklist that I used to refer to it all the time. Just whenever in doubt, you hit the checklist. Does it meet everything? One of those things is emotion, right? And I think in the example that we just gave with children, is our feelings can get in the way. If you're having a really strong emotional feeling about something, it's very likely not your intuition, okay? Because intuition, though it is a feeling from your heart, It's not an emotion. Intuition moves us, it calls us, it guides us, but it doesn't overwhelm us with emotion. So if we're feeling really, really full of like anxiety or fear or something like that, then that's probably coming from our personal place, our personal ego, or our personal needs. Whereas intuition is still calm and quiet.
So you call this radical intuition. This is something that you have radical intuition tips in the book, and you have radical insights. Why the word radical around intuition?
Yeah. So, we talked a lot about, what really embodies this type of intuition that we're talking about this in the book, because it's a different kind of intuition book. It's not the normal intuition book that you might expect. So the idea of radical intuition really stemmed out of something that I've been talking about for probably the last 10 years since I sat down at that, first strategic planning meeting and started hearing tech companies talking about intuition and creative people who are leading the way talking about intuition, really reimagining this big picture intuition as something that's going to change the world and the future. We're in the middle of what I call right now an intuition revolution. We're at the end of the digital era. We're moving beyond this information age into a place where now machines, computers are going to be smarter than we are. And so we have to rely on something within us in our humanity to take us to that next level, right? And intuition has all of that potential, opening up that other side of our thinking mind to really tap into our genius and that sort of quantum thinking. There's just so much out there that really ties into the way that we're going to be thinking and living in the future. So understanding intuition as this personal experience and this personal way of knowing, but also as this force that's changing the world and really opening up a whole new kind of future for everyone.
Is there a certain type of, intuition that can be used in AI and artificial intelligence? Is that what it is?
So that's some of my favorite conversations. And working with Carnegie Mellon University, I've worked with a lot of designers and programmers and AI people, and I've had some really fun conversations. And that's where I always press them. I always like, we need to talk about intuition. Tell me about this. And people have different ideas. There's not one singular answer. But I think really the overarching theme that keeps coming up again and again is that our humanity is still the thing that's keeping us ahead of the computers, ahead of the machines with our intuition. So intuition, machines might get really smart. They might get super smart, but having intuition isn't something that we can program in them yet because we're still learning to use our own intuition. So we're still ahead of the evolutionary curve by having this sort of intuitive capability that is yet to be really fully manifested in the machines and computers. But it might someday.
Yeah, but that's very interesting because you're right. We really haven't learned how to listen to it in the first place.
Yes.
And we've got to be able to master that ability to listen to it. So I'm going back to the fear point around maybe, okay, so we're in this world where this is a, post-pandemic world, and we are having to either listen to the experts or listen to our intuition. How do you decipher that?
Yeah, and I think about that every day, and it really truly is. It's a situation that we're all in right now. And at the end of the day, I always say, to your own higher self, be true. And regardless of what the world is saying, what everyone's saying, we always have to check in with ourselves and see how that information feels. And that's what I recommend to people when you're hearing all this stuff out there in the media, in the news, in the scientific journals. Check in with yourself and touch in with that intuitive connection. And is it something that feels right to you? Is it something that doesn't feel right?
Okay, that's a good way of doing it. Let's try a little exercise here. Mm-hmm. So how would you guide us through, and you have students and you teach this to students, right? Is that what Intuition Labs does?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. We teach people how to develop it and tap into it and really become aware of it.
Okay. So if we're in a classroom situation, would you ever ask your students, let's get an intuitive hit about something like post-pandemic world? Like, what does your intuition tell you we're going to be living like when we finally get this a little more under control? Yeah. Have you imagined into that or reimagined into that?
Well, I'm starting for that particular question. We're starting our next our first session really since the pandemic started in about 2 weeks. So it's definitely going to be something that's top of mind, because I think it's something that we're all want to understand. Like, what's life going to look like? What is our role going to be? What part are we going to play in the future, and how are our lives going to be different? So we can do an exercise if that's something that you want. Do you want to do something fun right now with me?
I would love to. Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So I have in the book, I have this little exercise that I love to do, and it's great because we can do it even if we're not together, if we're here in different parts of the country talking with each other. It's called my Through the Wormhole exercise, and what that means is it's sort of an example of quantum thinking, our ability to get an answer, to make a decision, to get intuitive information without all that thinking in between. So we go straight from just posing our question, putting our intention out, to allowing our intuition to speak with us with an answer. And it does it metaphorically, symbolically, and it's really, really easy. So,
okay.
Want to give it a shot?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So to do this, all we need to do is sort of think about two things that you're choosing between, right? So even if you're thinking about what to do in the future, say the pandemic's over and you're trying to decide, am I going to do this with my life, or should I pivot and try something new? Maybe pick two things to keep it simple. You can do more than two ultimately if you try this again at home, but just to keep it simple for practice, kind of think in your head maybe two different things that you might want to be doing. If you're listening along at home, just take a moment and think about these two things. And Lisa, would you be able to pick something you could talk about with us afterwards, and we could go through this?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Gosh, there's so many things.
You don't have to tell us yet, though. You can.
Well, I can. I mean, so our daughter's in, applying for colleges, and
Good.
she really wants to go East Coast, and we live in the West Coast. And so she's applied to both East Coast and West Coast. And so when she gets her acceptances, I would love to feel into what is the best thing for her. Is this okay to do? Because
Perfect.
it's also for us. Okay.
That's perfect. That is
Okay.
exactly I think I did something like this with my own daughter already, so I know exactly.
Oh, great. Okay, great.
She was picking her colleges too. So, so this is perfect. So, maybe thinking in terms of East Coast and West Coast. Now, in the first thing to do is to think in terms of symbols, because intuition doesn't usually speak in full sentences and come right out and just lay it on a plate for us. It's the other side of our mind. It's that intuitive, creative side. So a lot of times it'll speak to us in symbols and with our imagination. So pick a symbol maybe that represents one for the East Coast and one for the West Coast.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you?
Like maybe
Okay.
yeah.
So like the East Coast is like a red type of color that's just intuitively come to me.
Okay.
And the West Coast is a blue type of color. So I don't know if it's because there's a lot of East Coast schools with red logos, but
Okay.
and a lot of blue logos in East Coast and West Coast schools. I don't know why, but that's kind of what like a red ball or a blue ball.
Okay, a red ball and blue ball, perfectly. Okay, so now what we'll do, we're just going to take a moment, we'll take a deep breath, and we'll kind of close our eyes and touch into our intuitive space. And then what I'd like you to do, go ahead and we'll do that along with me. I'll talk you through it. So everybody out there, just kind of like take a deep breath.
Do this at home.
Do this at home. Do it right along with us. It just takes a second. And so you definitely want to take a moment and clear your mind, because we want to get into that high vibe place, so that smile on your face and feel good. That allows us to touch into that intuitive energy that is beyond our thinking mind. So we just want to relax into the moment and let our thoughts pass aside. Just relax your mind and place one symbol on one side of your field of vision, and then the other symbol on the other side of your field of vision. So in this case, put the blue ball to one side and the red ball to one side. And just imagine them there in your field of vision. And then gently and slowly take turns touching in with your attention to each of them. Move into one, then move into the other. Now, does one interact with you differently than the other? Does one draw you in more? Does one speak to you? Does one pull away? See how right? Start to develop a relationship with each of them. And I'm going to stop talking, and I'll just kind of let that unfurl and just let your imagination flow with that and see where each one takes you.
Interestingly, when I go to the red ball, it keeps moving away and moving away. It's like I can't touch
can't
it,
get
just keeps, right, it just keeps moving away. Now, could that be my anxiety about her moving away, far, far, far away? Because the East Coast is far.
It's far away.
Like Vermont is very far from California.
So to make sure, so the red ball was East Coast, blue ball was West Coast, right? So first of all, before we get into that, what happened with the blue ball?
It stayed, it was very close and tactile and playful and touchable, and it was just there. Accessible, I guess, is a good word.
Right. Okay. So the idea, ideally, this is an environment that will create a situation where your anxieties and fears shouldn't be affecting you, because we're not thinking like that. We're not thinking about them. We're kind of just interacting with these elements that have a life of their own. Right. So,
but it's a good example because that definitely comes up, right?
Yes, it absolutely comes up, right? And that's the point in doing something like that, is trying to separate out, right, those fears and those conscious sort of discernments that we have about situations, and just relate to a symbol or relate to a very simple experience, and then allow that experience the way that it speaks to us, right? Because intuition is all about receiving. It's just opening up and receiving. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to work for it. So when we just connect in this way and just allow it to speak to us, we're symbolically letting our intuition sort of tell a story to us, or give us a summary or an experience in terms of actually the unfolding of our relationship with this particular symbol.
Okay, so I'll try this again, and this time I won't let my judgment get in the way. And that was kind of a good example, because we have a certain way we really want things to work out, or we don't want things to work out and so in this case, I really need to just let it go and really feel into what feels best.
Exactly. Just release. And that's why it's so important in the beginning to take that deep breath and that deep pause and just let it out, and just release your attachments, because that's so key with intuition. We have to release our attachments to things, because the truth just is. It's not going to be what we want it to be. We want to move into the place where we can know what is.
Oh, that's so cool. The truth just is. Look, I invite anyone to go into it if you have a decision to make. This is just as an example. And I am wondering a little bit, if I'm not making the decision for her, she's ultimately going to make her own decision. I just wanted to know what I felt about it, because it's a journey that we kind of go on as a family together in the beginning. Right? And she's going to be there for, 4 years or whatever. So, okay, letting go of attachments, letting go of any preconceived notion of what I want, going into what is, because the truth just is, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Just close your eyes and just.
Okay. That's funny.
What's the first thing that comes? I love it.
This is funny. It's not going to be East or West Coast. It's somewhere in the middle of the country.
Is that your first thought?
That was my first thought.
So this is what you have to do when we get off here. When we stop talking, write all this stuff down, because that's the thing. You always have to write this down, because we don't know right now, right? We don't know in this moment.
Right.
But we know in 3 months from now, you can go back and be like, this is what this meant.
That's interesting, because she did apply to middle of the country, like Wisconsin, Indiana, those types of St. Louis. Yeah, so maybe it's not the either extreme, it's somewhere right in the middle.
Well, and that's so great. I love what just happened, because intuition is all about first impressions. It has to come in so fast before our mind comes in here. So I trust what people say when you say moments like that, and you laugh immediately, because that's intuition. It's those first instincts, those first impressions, those first ideas that beat your mind before your mind can do all that rational stuff and anxiety and fear and all that.
Right. That's why I laughed instantly. And interestingly enough, if I think about it, a couple of those middle of the country schools are red, and there's some in there that are green. I mean, I'll just take a look, but that's really fun. So I instantly just went after what that first thing was. It didn't make any sense, and I had to do a restart there because I was throwing mom's judgment in there.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm sorry for anyone who has an only child that
Hey, don't feel bad. I actually moved to be closer to my daughter when she went to college, so I can relate.
okay. All right. I don't feel so bad.
Don't feel so
Look,
bad.
I mean, look, this last 10, 11 months of the pandemic has brought our family even closer. And so it's going to be quite an adjustment. So the senior year, they're supposed to be going out more and having more of an
Yeah.
experience and loose, just kind of detaching. And she's been inside with us for 10 months. So and I'm sure other people are experiencing that same thing with Zoom schools and so forth. And so it's an adjustment for everyone, and you can do that for your business, for anything. I read in your book, which I really liked, was it's about consciousness. Could you explain your definition of consciousness for me?
Yeah, and I in the book I talk about intuitive levels of consciousness, and this is the way it helps me to understand intuition in terms of how we receive it and how we really awaken to it. So basically, I look at it in terms of three different levels of intuitive consciousness. The first being unconsciousness, obviously, and then consciousness, and then higher consciousness or super consciousness. And most of the time, most of us are just walking around life in sort of this interplay between unconsciousness and consciousness. And this sort of ties into the work that Eckhart Tolle does in The Power of Now, of really awakening into that presence and that awareness. And until we get to that awakening, we go through our lives and we're not really paying attention to half the things we do. Our minds are somewhere else. We're really unconscious about the way we relate to people and the way that we serve in the world. So in that place, it's very difficult for intuition to get through. And that's why a lot of people you'll just get a little spark of intuition, maybe here and there, even once every couple of years, something will happen, right? And you just aren't even aware of it as part of your daily routine or your daily life. But as you start to awaken, as you move into that place of presence and being, your intuition awakens too. And in that space that we create, our intuition starts to speak to us and starts to become more conscious and starts to become more open and guiding. So this is when life starts to get really interesting. This is when we really start to see life in a new way and understand that there's so much more to reality. There's so much more to existence than we realized when we were in that unconscious place, going through our daily grind and living, just by the hour by hour without thinking beyond, where we are in time and space. But there's more even, there's more beyond this conscious place. There's a higher conscious place, a super conscious place where insight flows. And it's like I say, and all of the information in the world is out there. It's all data. It's everything that's ever happened, has already happened, or will happen. It's all there in terms of data. And our higher self, our higher consciousness knows it and can connect to it through our intuition. So it's that ability to tap into that cloud of eternal information around us and to really use that as a guiding light in our life, because it's this higher perspective that is beyond what we can see and this little point on the road. That's the key to this insightful life. And the more we open to our intuition, the more clear it becomes.
I love that higher self. Sometimes when I'm out in nature, it's easier to connect to that higher self. And it's quiet, it's still, it's a different frequency altogether. And if you live in a busy city, I highly recommend finding somewhere where you can find the frequency of nature. Even if you just sit under a tree, you have that different, it's just vibrates at a different level. Yes. And it's a great way to access that intuition.
I could not agree with you more, 100%. And, that's one of the gifts of this silver lining of this experience that, we're having now with the pandemic is a little more time and maybe some time to go outside on those walks alone and spend those times in nature, because the vibration there is so conducive to our intuition and to our awakening and really reconnecting with our true being.
That's great. It's kind of like a conduit.
It is.
Let me ask you about Intuition Labs. So you said that this is one of the first classes that you're having back after the shutdown originally in March. Is it in person or is it virtual?
So we do all online. Now we do online. I used to do so many retreats. I used to do 4 retreats every year. And we had just sold out our first Sedona retreat and I had to cancel it because it was the first month of the pandemic. So I was very disappointed about that. But we did have a I did do a special class right when the pandemic started because everyone was freaking out and everybody was alone, and we really needed community in that time when we were all in that first lockdown. So at that point, I did a program, and it was so wonderful for everybody just to have that therapy that we needed to connect with each other beyond, this sort of pandemic shutdown. So yeah, this is the first one since the summer. I've been so busy launching my book that I wasn't able to give any classes until now. So I'm really excited about it.
So has anything changed for you between the beginning of the pandemic and now, intuition wise? I mean, now we've gone into a second lockdown where you actually can have some planning around it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for me, I think luckily having the online portion be so much of my work that I had, really had the platform set up to be able to work and share my work online. So for me, in terms of change, yeah, I moved out to the country. I moved to the lake. So I have this daily experience of being out in nature more, which harkens back to what we were just talking about. So for me, it has really been a time of intuitive breakthrough. I've had so many wonderful experiences just simply by now moving out of the city and having time in nature to be with myself. So on a personal level, I've had some really profound understandings of my own life and what I want to do with it. But in terms of connecting with my community and serving, the pandemic's really shifted gears for me in terms of how I reach people and doing more work online and really trying to maintain that human connection.
What can people do right now we had that great exercise where I showed how to make a decision, but what can people do right now if they don't maybe have a decision and they're just leaning into something new, to really listen to what the message is that maybe the universe or the divine or your own higher self is trying to tell you?
Yeah, and this is a great time to be asking that question, especially at this moment in time with, coming out of a pandemic. Hopefully we'll be doing that. We're all going to have a fresh start. We're all going to have a new start coming up. Hopefully all of the craziness of this world will finally die down at some point. And either way, even if it doesn't, it's an opportunity for us to bring new energy in our life and do things that we haven't done before. So this is a great time to be asking that question and to be touching back into with ourselves. So for me, and what I've been going through this journey just like everybody else, and what's worked for me really is taking that time out and using this time that we have as an opportunity to spend more time alone with ourselves. That thing called a higher self that we all have, we need to spend more time with it. And I know it's hard to be alone, but if we remind ourselves, and when we're alone, we're not always alone. We're really with ourselves. We're really with that connection, that higher part of ourselves that we can develop a relationship with, and we can have guidance, and we can have conversations, and we can really have explorations of our life. So there's a lot we can do as we build that practice, but spending more time in every day, a little time every day, alone with ourselves is a great first step.
One of the things that I've heard from many people is that they now have been given the choice, do I want to go back to the way my life was prior to the pandemic? And many have decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that begs again the question of how do you decide what your next step would be if you don't even have a decision to make? How do you decide that?
Yeah. So there we are. So we're in this place where we know that the old stuff wasn't working. Like we're done with that. We don't want to go back to that. And that, I think that's creating a lot of anxiety for people right now, because now we've have this space and we realize, okay, like I was just caught up in this and I wasn't really conscious of, but I don't want to do that anymore. So your intuition's there, whether you realize it or not. Your intuition's been nudging you. It's been guiding you. It's been sending you little signs with little things you notice along the way. So really getting into that space of listening and listening to the little ideas that come to you, how you're called, the things that you love, the things that you're passionate about. So there's no coincidence that you have a passion or that you're drawn to things, right? Because that's our intuition aligning us with our path and purpose. And people talk a lot about this alignment, and that's the job of our intuition, is to align us with that path and purpose. So if we follow those sort of ideas that come, like, oh, maybe I should try this, maybe I'll explore this, see how it feels, go with that resonant feeling, really open up to that. And it's only going to take us step by step. That's the thing. A lot of us think it's some magical thing, like, oh, I'm just going to magically, go and be a rock star and it's going to be great.
All my answers will be clear to me.
Exactly.
That'd be nice.
If only it worked that way.
I know.
But it's a step-by-step process. So we do have to slow down and be patient and realize that we might have to do some hard work, or it might take longer than we think. And again, it gets back to this trust in life. So if we can get into a place with, no matter what happens, we trust that we're on the path, and we trust in ourselves every step of the way, and the universe every step of the way, and continue on, we will get there. We'll get where we're meant to be.
I hope you're right, Kim. I really
it's a
do.
tough time, I know.
Have you noticed, out of talking with people, that there's any specific themes that come up, like I was just mentioning, where people are saying, maybe I don't want to go back to what I had? Have you noticed other themes?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, I think people are, a lot of people, because, we work in the holistic field, so I think a lot of people are very much relishing the time and the space. We didn't realize how busy we were. I think that's the number one thing that I see. People don't realize how busy and how overextended and how focused on the outside world that we are. So intuition, part of radical intuition, part of that radical part is that radical shift of turning your attention and your allegiance from the outside world to the inside world. So it's no longer being, captivated by the success or the achievement or the 9 to 5 or the money or the security or the stuff. It's now being captivated by that love within us, that truth, that knowingness, that guiding everythingness that's within us, and letting all that other stuff fall into place beyond it. So I think that shift, making the shift from the outer to the inner, we've all been forced to do that a little bit. And then we're like, okay, so this feels good. Like, there's a part of this that feels good. Like, there's a part of this that feels very bad and scary right now, but there's a little part of this that feels good. And I think that's part of the growth pains that we're going through right now, is to show us where we were out of balance and disconnected, and that give us a little taste of how wonderful that connection feels.
Do you ever, with corporations, get together and kind of reimagine new ways of doing things, or a different future for a corporation or maybe individuals?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of corporations and universities and arts organizations around the world when we've had these kind of conversations about, what does reinvention mean? How do we reinvent cities? What do we bring into communities to bring change and to bring people together? And I think that's an important conversation right now, and that's one of the things that's so wonderful about intuition, because intuition is the ultimate connector. We're all aligned with our intuition, which is a single source that unites us all beyond the labels, beyond the division, right? So the more that we start to align and turn back within, and we all turn within, the more we turn towards each other instead of away from all the things that separate us.
What about our intuition about our health, like our own medical intuition? How do you develop that?
Yeah, and that's super important. And that's a lot of things people don't realize that we have, right? Even when it comes to dieting and eating, the best diet that you can go on is intuitive eating, is intuitively learning what your body wants, and your body will tell you. And it's so important to listen to those little nudges. So ask yourself, if you want to figure out what to eat, ask yourself what you're attracted to, what appeals to you, not what you're craving, right? Not like I want chocolate cake.
Oh yeah, no, I'd be eating nacho chips all day if I listened to that intuition.
And salsa.
That's not going to work. That is not going to work.
But it's the attraction, not the craving, right? So if you open your fridge, there's going to be some things that taste good to you and some things that don't taste good to you, right? So there's an element of intuition in the way that you eat that can really help you to balance stuff out in the way you don't know. Maybe your body needs calcium and you're really attracted to drinking milk right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there's that level. And Kelly Noonan-Gorris did a really interesting movie on Heal, I'm sure you know, and they talk a lot about that and how important intuition is when we heal and when we eat and when we keep ourselves healthy.
Well, that's your next book, Kim, is Eating Intuitively.
That's right.
And so if I'm craving an apple, I'm craving the vitamin A or whatever's in an apple.
Yeah.
But that's a great idea. But the nacho chips have no nutritional value, so therefore I should not eat them.
I don't know about that. I think the chips have value. Maybe
Nope.
carbs. Maybe your body just needs some energy.
More carbs, right? Less coffee. That's what coffee's for.
Exactly.
But I do. Have you ever entwined dreams and intuition together?
Yeah, I call dreams sort of backdoor intuition. So,
Okay.
Because we're totally unconscious when we sleep. It's like the most unconscious we get. You know, when I talk about the levels of consciousness and we're walking around, we're not like totally unconscious, but when we're in our sleep, that's like the lowest of consciousness. We're totally unaware. But in those times, our intuition can sneak in. And I always say it's backdoor intuition because it just comes out of nowhere in the form of sometimes you'll have messages, sometimes you'll have dreams about people. And there's so many different ways our intuition can kind of sneak in and guide us or help us to face our fears.
Interesting. One of our listeners just typed in salt. They crave salt a lot. And that's a great example of someone who really just could listen to that. Maybe there's a thyroid imbalance where the iodine from the salt is needed or something like that. That's
well,
a good guide.
Actually, that's really a great point because I also had that exact same experience. I am like crazy about salt. People will go nuts. Like I put so much salt in my food, and it turns
Me
out,
too.
well, I have low blood pressure. I found out years ago. I was like, wow, I have really, really low blood pressure. And my doctor said, you need to eat more salt. And I was like, that's funny because I like salt.
Interesting. I do too. I have naturally low blood pressure, and I put salt.
So there we have
salt.
it. There we proved intuitive eating.
Unfortunately, it's not the sea salt that I want. It's the iodine, the table salt.
Yes.
That is poison for diabetics, but it's incredible for people like low blood pressure. I know.
So that's where we have to use our sense of discernment when we bring in our rational mind to say, okay, I need to channel this sort of intuitive impulse in a healthy way. Because it is, at the end of the day, about balancing both the mind, the thinking mind and the intuitive mind. So when they work together like this, that's when we get stuff done.
Well, I would love to see. And how do people get involved with the intuition labs and so forth?
Yeah, so you can visit intuitionlab.com. I have a number of free programs. I have a free 12-page Wake Up Your Intuition guide if you want to get out there and start doing some of this work right now. It's a great way to get started, especially in the new year and especially in these crazy times. And you can also check out lots of free stuff, and I have free activities on my website, kimchestney.com.
Okay, and then the book.
And then the book, yay! Radical Intuition. It's available everywhere on my website and online, Amazon, all your favorite booksellers, Target, Walmart, you name it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for reminding us what it really means to have radical intuition and to follow it during a time where we could easily be overrun with fear. If you watch the news for 5 minutes, it becomes overwhelming for anyone that's sensitive as well, empathically. It's a great idea to learn how to drive the car of intuition and to have some level of, I don't want to say control, but guidance around it. Which is
absolutely,
great.
Absolutely. And it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you having me. It was so fun talking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. So the book is called Radical Intuition, and I invite you to follow your intuition. I always say at the end of every show that I invite you to listen to your own truth, and I invite you to stay aware. And that's the reason that I do that, because it constantly teaches you. As I said earlier, this is active media. You are actively participating in this conversation. So try some of these exercises. Talk to a friend and say, hey, I had this great show. I heard the Aware Show, and we talked about intuition today with Kim Chestney. You should check out her book, Radical Intuition. All right. Well, thank you again. And also, if you want to listen to our podcast, you can listen to the podcast, which is on all areas and all places you find your podcast. It's called The Aware Show. And thank you so much to Gina Salvati, the executive producer of The Aware Show, and John Davis, the engineer, tech engineer of The Aware Show, and to Michael Cosio, who is our editor of The Aware Show. And until next time, I invite you to stay aware. Thank you.